Honestly, I think Carney is going to win the election. Whether he waits 6 months or he goes right away, I think he's going to win the election. How big? I don't know. It might be a minority, it might be a very tiny minority. I'm not sure. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Radical Center. We are back with a very exciting episode to tell you about all the things that are going on in federal and provincial politics this week, or maybe not all the things, but some of the things. So we'll talk about whatever we can, and then we'll go from there. With me today is Cody. As always, he never misses an episode, and I'm so grateful for that, because otherwise I'd be sitting around here talking to myself, and anybody wants to hear that. How are you, Cody?
I'm doing fantastic. This is episode 15. And, I think I could speak for the both of us and just say that thank you to all of the people who I know that message us outside of the podcast. Very happy with what we've been doing. And I just, this is your place for truth, calm. And if you want to see around corners sometimes, I'm not here to brag or give credit for anything that we say on here on this show, but hopefully it gives you a little peace of mind as you're going about your week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am also grateful for all the positive feedback that we've gotten. And we seem to get a lot of attention on different platforms depending on the episode, which is great. I didn't see that coming when we first started this. I thought, it's just me and Cody just doing something fun, mainly for ourselves. But then people actually started paying attention, and that's absolutely wonderful. We encourage you to keep paying attention. Tell your friends, share, like, and subscribe. Do all the things that you do with a regular podcast, well, with any podcast you like. Let's get right to it. You see me wearing a Canada's Not For Sale hat. There's a lot going on in Canada right now. Doug Ford, I don't think he brought his hat to Washington, but he went to Washington and he had a bunch of meetings. So some of that translated into content of an ad, which kind of created a little bit of controversy. We'll talk about that. But let's talk about the trip itself. He went with the premiers to Washington. What do you think was the purpose of that? Do you think, there was a positive outcome? Where are things at with Doug Ford's trip to Washington?
This is one of those things where I actually did expect a lot more from the premier, I have to be honest. A lot of it is it's more the Team Canada approach. A lot of it is, the 13 premiers going down to Washington. They said they had met with some leaders and they would met with this person and met with that person. And I was actually kind of disappointed because I don't want to hear that you just had meetings and flew back, especially when it's been reported in the media that the trip cost upwards of $85,000. They met with the deputy chief of staff. His name's James Blair. He's a no bullshit guy. You can't get anything past that guy. The other person was Sergio, which was both of them had a role in the first Trump administration. And you can tell immediately that when the premiers went to the cameras and David Eby made some comments that were refuted by both of the White House officials, I don't think there was anything substantive that come out of it other than to tell Canadians, yeah, we're having lots of meetings.
Although I will defend them a little bit. They're just doing their jobs, right? I don't think anyone's expecting that the premiers are going to be able to make the tariffs go away, but it's more so a step in the right direction, that you have a bigger team advocating than just the prime minister's office and the senior ministers that he's sending. I honestly see it as a positive thing. I think that they're doing what they can do with the capacity that they have. Remember, premiers are a big deal in Canada. They're not a big deal in the United States. So, of course, they're not going to get a meeting with the president of the United States. It's not going to happen. So they have an entirely different political system that wouldn't really. I read some criticisms that he went there and Doug Ford went to Washington. He didn't even get a meeting with Doug Ford. Of course, he's not going to get a meeting with Doug Ford. No offense to Doug or any premier in Ontario, but they're not important enough to meet with Doug Ford. Sorry, with Donald Trump. They're not important enough to meet with Donald Trump. So I see it, a positive step. They were doing their jobs. That is their job, to at least put some effort into the Team Canada effort as a whole. So I think the bigger criticisms that he's receiving is he went there during a campaign period, and who paid for the trip. And I understand that the PC party paid for most of the trip, but the reality is I see this as he still went there to do his job even though he was in the middle of a campaign period. And the reality is this is going to be good for him electorally, whether the opposition parties see that or not, because people are going to go see, are going to see that he's working to make that happen. I don't think the average Canadian expects that Doug Ford himself, or any premier really, is going to go to the United States and stop the tariffs from happening. I think that's a bigger negotiation that's going to happen with the trade minister and with the prime minister and his office. I think this was more of an advocacy trip, and I think they did their best to advocate as much as they're able to within their capacity. So I'm a little bit softer on him for this.
And the other thing that I will add too, I think the opposition leaders attacking him for going down there and I guess abusing taxpayer funds or whatever. Like, at the end of the day, he has a very competent team, and it sounds like that they checked with the integrity commissioner before they went down there, right? So I'm sure that the integrity commissioner gave them pointers or said, hey, if you are going to go down, this is how you avoid a problem. And I don't think that integrity commissioner thing is going to go anywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's what the integrity commissioner is there to do, right? To give advice on how to avoid a problem if there is a potential for it. I agree. I don't think any of the stuff is going to get anywhere. I think that, this overall played pretty well into his narrative of I'm the guy who's fighting for Canada, fighting against the tariffs and working day and night. Nothing's going to stop me from working for you, even an election. So I think this is going to go over well for him. My bigger question, though, in this whole thing, and we'll keep talking about that, I honestly don't think people are paying attention to an election right now. I don't think anyone, we'll see what the voter turnout is going to be, but I honestly think that the average Canadian is not, or the average Ontarian is not paying attention to any of the stuff that we're talking about. And I think that's going to play very well for the PC party because they're just going to get voted in by a very small number of people. We'll see. This is just my sense.
No, I agree. My sense is from the people in my circles as well is that not very many people are paying attention. I mean, low turnout, they say, tends to benefit the incumbent. We'll have to see how that pans out. I made a joke off camera last week. I said that the opposition may get destroyed to such a degree that they're going to call for an RCMP investigation into Doug Ford the next day. So, but yeah, it's the PCs they have been in the driver's seat since the last election at least, and they still are. And Ian Connerty, when we had him on, he had said that the numbers that you see before the writ drops is probably what it's going to be like when the election actually happens. And I haven't seen any indication that he's wrong.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think the biggest thing is no one's paying attention. And if people aren't paying attention, doesn't matter how much you're going to scream and scream and scream, that message is not going to resonate if no one's listening. So, I get what the opposition parties are trying to do, and they're really, really, that's their job. They have to do it. They have no other option, right? They're not going to just like quit and like do nothing, right? They have to do it. It's just that message is not, it's not sinking in, whether it's about the integrity commissioner, whether it's about his trip to Washington, whether it's about this hot mic moment. He was caught on mic talking about making a comment that would indicate that He perhaps would want to send home invaders who commit murder to the death penalty. He's later clarified that he does not support the death penalty, and he never has. But again, how many people are paying attention to this and factoring that comment into their decision? I guess this is a good question. How many people are factoring this comment into their decision of who they're going to vote for on February 27th, if they're going to vote at all, right?
Yeah. Look, I agree with you once again. I don't know how many people are paying attention. The problem that I have with these two hot mic moments, and this is just my impression. My impression from it is, there's two hot mic moments. There was him be literally on camera multiple times, not just in the first hot mic, but before, saying that he supports Donald Trump. It's video, it's audio, it's real, it happened. The second thing, when he said he wanted to send violent criminals to Sparky, it's another thing. It's on video, it's on microphone. It happened. But the way I read their responses, it's not that they're lying, it's that they're not telling the truth. And the reason why I say that is because they're trying to clarify, they're trying to explain their way out of this problem. And if I were him, in both of these instances, including with this, send them to Sparky moment, what I would have said is, something, it frustrates me as premier when I see home invaders and violent offenders get out on bail and continuously do it over and over again. And there are some times where I hear or I see life sentences for the most disgusting filth in our society that commit the most heinous crimes, like Michael Rafferty, who murdered Tory Stafford, like the colonel that's sitting, I think, in Kingston. Some of those people, they aren't worth the breath that they're breathing right now. And what he should have said is, look, I don't always choose the right words, but just like you, I'm frustrated when I see people commit violent acts, right? So that's what I wish that he would have said. But I mean, again, if nobody's paying attention, then it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, I think their strategy is to just move off the issue because it doesn't matter and focus on, look, there's a big threat of tariffs. His whole election campaign is basically one sentence. There's a big threat of tariffs. I'm the guy who's going to vote for you. Sorry, who's going to fight for you. You can't trust the other people. That was maybe a
I'm
few.
sorry. One more thing.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the tariffs, right? What I would have said for that is very simple. Yes, I said this. Sometimes I don't use the best words, but Donald Trump and I are businessmen, which is why I struggle to understand why he would want a tariff war when it'll hurt business. And then he can sum it up with, put a little bow on it, and say, look, I'm not perfect, but my record shows that I will do whatever it takes to protect Ontario. That's what should have been the responses to both of those hot mic moments. You tell the truth, this is what I meant, and this is my record. So, but again, you're right. You're right in the sense that they just want to move on. Yeah. I get the sense that, like, even Doug Ford, he said, my staff wants me to stay on script. Obviously, the staff is trying to protect him. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
But those hot mic moments that the opposition is using to try and hurt him, he should own it, because I think that, average construction workers like me who just shoot the shit back and forth every day and playing language, they don't want to hear a political statement, right? So
yeah, I get that, but we'll see how it goes. We still have a couple more weeks to go with this election, and we'll continue talking about it. So let's move over to the federal side. The NDP sent out a memo preparing for an early election. Conservatives are also sending emails to supporters, get ready for an early election. We are in the midst of it. Carney himself is talking about potentially triggering an early election. I think it's safe to assume that Carney is going to win that leadership race unless something major happens. Do you think this is happening?
I'll speak for myself, but the difference between the provincial and the federal election and the time leading up to that is, I know people in conservative circles, people in liberal circles, And this is chatter that happens. And I would say that both of us had pretty good sources as to when the provincial election was going to be called. But I could say in all honesty, I don't know about this. What I will say is if I was Mark Carney and there's something weird happening in the polls where there are polls showing the Liberals erasing the Conservative leads. There are polls showing the Liberals within striking distance. And there are some polls that show that not much has changed. So if I'm Mark Carney, I'm not even the leader yet, and my party is competitive with the Conservatives, I would do it. Because the only person who's taking losses right now is the NDP. They're suffering from the Liberals being leaderless and not having Justin Trudeau in the picture. And the other thing is too, with the Conservatives, if you stretch it out to October, that's a big problem for the Conservatives. But there's also a con to that too, and for the Liberals, because that gives the Conservatives an unlimited amount to spend on time on ads and defining Mark Carney. I think that Pierre Poilievre, the carbon tax thing is not going to work on its own in the next election. All the promises and staples of the Liberal agenda that were unpopular, whether it's on the immigration file, on the carbon tax, on the capital gains tax, Mark Carney is taking those things off the table. And I know that some people are saying that, Pierre is on the back foot and he's struggling to find his message. There is some truth to that. But there's also a part where you have to think that in politics, things are always changing. And what the Conservatives have to do if they still want to win the next election is they have to change their messaging, which is what you're seeing today in Ottawa, where the Conservatives are holding what they're calling the Canada First rally, I guess, to launch the new messaging of the party.
So I was of the opinion that he should wait about 6 months for people to get to know him a little bit more. But I'm starting to lean towards he should go right away because of the polls and because the polls are starting to get better. Also because you never know with Donald Trump what he decides to do and what he decides to say. The reality is this is a really good, I mean, it's a terrible time for Canadians because we don't want the tariffs. So I have to make sure that's said, and Canada's not for sale, but it is a good time for an incumbent party because people don't like to change governments when there's a crisis, right? So that's why Doug Ford went for the election. That's why it would make sense for Carney to go into an election. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is 100% he has to get rid of the carbon tax. Like the carbon tax needs to be off the table. AXA tax is gone. There's no tax to axe. We can move on from that. Here's the thing though. Overall, in general, people vote for people they like. Leader likability is probably the number one indicator of how well they're going to do in a party's going to do in an election. If they don't like the leader, there is nothing they can say or do that's going to change that. There's no message that's going to be well received. There's no policy direction that they can shift into, that they could redeem themselves. And we saw that with Justin Trudeau. There was just nothing he could do. He was just unlikable, disliked at that point, and he had to go. Carney's likable. Pierre's not very likable. And I think him doing so well in the polls for a very extended period of time made them a little bit big on ego, which made it even worse because, you could see it in the way they, not just him, but even some of his high profile people, you could see that their ego was a little too big for a party that's still in opposition that hasn't even tasted government yet.
Yeah, and I said 2 episodes ago that they can't get too cocky. They were sitting on top of a supermajority, and now he's gonna have to work for it. And leader likability, regardless of what I think of Mark Carney, at the end of the day, Canadians are gonna have a choice. They're gonna have a choice between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. I'm sorry to all the NDP supporters that I'm going to offend out there, but Jagmeet Singh is not going to become the next Prime Minister of Canada. So, it's between Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney, and there are conservative issues that resonate with people. There are conservative issues that are good for the base, but can really hurt you with the mushy middle. And you can shout from the rooftops of what people think about the woke agenda and all that stuff, but you're not preaching to a conservative audience. You're preaching to the entire country.
And I think that's what hurt him. And I don't think they realize that you can't veer too far to the right when, you still need the middle. The reality is, people were parking their vote with the conservatives because they wanted Trudeau out so badly, right? It's almost like, I don't like this guy. I will vote for whoever will make sure that he's gone and not in government anymore. But Trudeau's gone. Trudeau's gone. So now what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing people kind of thinking, I like the NDP, I'll vote for them. There's no threat of Trudeau anymore. He's gone. If Carney wins, I'll be okay with that. Right? Or I really like this Carney guy. Maybe he'll change the Liberal Party, and he got rid of the carbon tax, and he's getting rid of the things that I don't like. So maybe I'll give them another chance. So and then there's gonna be the people who are like, I'm a hardcore conservative, I'm not going anywhere, and I hate the woke agenda. But the reality is, you cannot win a conservative government by going too far to the right. We learned that from Doug Ford. Right? Look at Doug Ford. Does he touch any of the issues that Pierre has been going around talking about for? No, he doesn't. He won't touch it because he knows it's not going to get him any love in the middle. It's not going to get him any love in the center, or the radical center, where people just want things to be good for everyone, where they want a good economy that functions well, where everybody has an opportunity, has the best opportunities they have. We have a good social safety net, and a good healthcare and education system. Those are the things people want. And he spent all his time talking about things that work for his base and get people excited and probably raise them a lot of money, but won't get you the average Canadian voting for you. I think he's got a big problem on his hands, and I think it has a lot to do with getting too cocky too quickly. And I also think, honestly, like, I've watched so much footage of this man speaking, engaging with reporters, crunching that apple in the apple crunching video. He's just not warm and fuzzy. He just isn't. He's like a really angry, he's like that really angry kid in the debate club, and he just wants to be right all the time and tell everybody off. And people don't like that. They want someone they want to have a beer with. Most people want to vote for someone they want to have a beer with, right? And I'm not inviting Pierre over, so that's not going to be me. So
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at with Pierre. I think Carney is honestly, I think Carney is going to win the election. Whether he waits 6 months or he goes right away, I think he's going to win the election. How big? I don't know. It might be a minority. It might be a very tiny minority. I'm not sure. But I think the Pierre castle is crumbling.
Yeah, I would say they got to get their shit together, and they've got to figure out their messaging. And when it comes to the ideological thing, ideological parties don't get elected anywhere. If you look at one of the things that I think that the Ontario NDP is struggling with is they're an ideological party. And what the Conservatives have to do is, if they still want to take government, they need to get away from the ideological stuff. Of course, there are things that when you get into power, you're going to do to satisfy your base. But you can't be an ideological party and get elected. I mean, if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have said, yeah, I mean, Pierre Poilievre is the prime minister in waiting. but I'm not so sure about that now. Not because I'm going to definitively say that he's going to lose, but there is something happening in the country where public opinion is shifting, and people are going from being really angry at Justin Trudeau, and they're switching over to discovering what patriotism is. And if everybody is talking about Canada first, or we're proud to be a Canadian, it's kind of hard to say that Canada is broken, because that's not where people are right now. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. I'm glad I'm not a betting man, because I don't know where I would put my money right now. That's the honest to God truth.
I would put it on Carney. I'm ready to say that he is going to win the election. And I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's it's a little bit too early. Don't say that just yet, Nokha." But I am ready to say that. I would say, Pierre struggled, like we said, with likability, but also with veering to the right, and also not being able to switch gears. I think it's very hard to leave the narrative that he painted, that Canada's broken. It's going to be really, really hard to backpedal from that. How do you backpedal? You've been screaming and yelling and saying the world is ending, Canada's falling apart for years now, right? That's been his thing. And he had all these reasons of why things are so bad. All of a sudden, Trump comes. There's a threat of tariff. It's a real threat to our country. There's talk about becoming a 51st state. And left, right, center, everybody's bonding together over hats, right? Everybody's like, where did Doug Ford get his hat? Because I want one. And it doesn't matter, if you're liberal or conservative anymore. Everybody wants to, stand up for Canada. And here's this guy who's been going on and on saying Canada sucks for so long, right? You can't backpedal from that. I think it's over for Pierre. I think, maybe I'm getting too ahead of myself. I really should, but I really think so. Anyway,
Yeah.
we do have a little madness in the air. There's a lot of patriotism going around. Something we haven't really seen before in Canada, I would say. Um, Canadians tend to be more like, we love our country, but we're kind of like, I don't know, we're kind of like, we're not very outwardly about it.
Yep.
Americans are, but we're not very outwardly about it. It's almost like we took it for granted, and now all of a sudden it's like, don't mess with Canada. We're here, we're gonna fight for our country, we're gonna buy Canadian, we're gonna do what it takes. And it's kind of beautiful, I gotta say. What do you think, Cody? Do you think this is gonna last?
Well, as I said, I've been holding this in for a while. I was proud of our country. Today is actually Canada Flag Day. I was proud of our country long before it was a trend.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are politicians in Ottawa and Queen's Park who want you to be proud of Canada when it fits their agenda. That's not patriotism. That's opportunism. And I didn't mention this because I really wanted to kept it to myself, but I might as well just say it. When Justin Trudeau came out the day before the tariffs were supposed to come in, and he said that we need to magically unite, it kind of made me angry. It's the same prime minister who's done everything in his power to divide our country, erase our history, and he's telling us now that we have to magically unite and be Canadian. Um, I people tell me, he's the same guy who preaches racial equality, then doing blackface. He took Terry Fox and Vimy Ridge off the passport, and it's personal to me because I'm proud to be a Canadian, because I have families who have come home from the military watching their friends get blown to pieces. I'm proud to be a Canadian because even my great uncle, he wanted to serve so bad. He actually went to America and lied about his age to go and fight in World War One, right? And there are a lot of people out there who feel the same way as I do, who did what our prime minister said and got the vaccine and stood with the people of Ukraine, because Team Canada, that was the right thing to do. I was wrong about those two things. But what I will say is that patriotism isn't about scolding your fellow citizens for making choices over their body. And it sure in hell isn't sending billions and billions of dollars to other countries in Europe or in the Middle East to bomb the shit out of civilians.
Mm-hmm.
Real patriotism is having a podcast with two people, right? From two different sides of the spectrum, two different life experiences to come together and have a respectful discussion to disagree, agree in either outcome. We still like each other. We're still doing the podcast, right? We disagree on things all the time. So I just, that's why it kind of irks me, because one point of me says that, you don't get to be the most unpatriotic prime minister that we've ever had and then turn around and tell us to get in line. With all due respect, Mr. Prime Minister, as my probably the last thing that I would say before you go out the door is like, you could take your patriotism, you can shove it up your ass, and as my Aunt Connie would say, and this is a true story, she tells me all the time, Cody, piss off. So
Well, the good
I'm
news is that
sorry.
he's leaving.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I went on a little bit of a rant there
It's okay.
because patriotism is not just, it's not just a sweater that you put on, right? But you know what? Out of all of this, wrap it in a bow. I hope that people stay patriotic, because I hope that it's not just Donald Trump that's making us patriotic. I hope that this is a new chapter that we're writing for our future. So,
Yeah, I hope so too. I hope so too. I think, a lot can come out of this. Yeah, I'm hopeful for the future. I certainly hope we don't become the 51st state. I do not look forward to any of that. And I also hope that the tariff threats go away immediately and that we never ever actually feel the impact of that. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. This has been wonderful, as always. Thank you again, Cody, for coming once again. And thank you to everyone who has been listening to us consistently. We hope that you continue doing that. My hat is from the Canada is Not for Sale. I think the website is called Canada is Not for Sale. They did not pay me for this. But if you want to, because people keep asking me it's online. They have a website, you can order it and they'll ship it for you. But thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful week ahead. We'll be back next week with more exciting stuff, and the provincial election is wrapping up soon, so we will share some information next week. We're going to share the information next week about what we're going to be doing election night, right, Cody? Because we're
that's
doing
correct.
something
Yep.
election night, but we just haven't figured it out yet. So just give us a couple of minutes, and we'll get back to you with a detailed plan, and then we'll go from there. Have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead, and we'll see you soon.